In a world where left is up and right is apparently wrong, do souls make sense of it all? Or at least have fun trying? Gear up, friends, for Chicken and the Dawg.
Welcome to another episode of Chicken and the Dawg. I am the dog, and with me, as always, is the guy that is sometimes known to be a little cocky, the chicken. What up, dog?
Careful where you use the word little.
That's right. Well, I'm going to leave that one alone. But anyway, look, welcome, guys. Another episode. And as I mentioned on the last show, our family just keeps growing, right? And so I mentioned that we have now a producer. And his name is Bryson. He's actually going to be on the show today listening, but I do have a question for him, and just to kind of let him speak to you guys for a quick moment, all the listeners, and let you know all the exciting things that he's doing. So, Bryson, go ahead and let us know what all you got going on, what platforms we're on now, and where you're taking the show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm super excited about the future and the growth of what we can do. But I just set up an Instagram, a Twitter, and a TikTok account. We're going to be posting short clips on there. And then we're going to be posting the full raw clips, of course, on the podcasting services such as Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And we're also going to be posting on YouTube. So we'll be on those platforms, and hopefully we can get some new fans and some new audience.
That's great. I mean, we're on Amazon and Apple and all them.
Oh,
now,
yes.
right?
Yes, sir. You're correct. Yep. I forgot that one. Let me add that to the list. Yep. You're on Amazon as well.
Man, that's fantastic, man. That's exciting. And again, I will say welcome. We are sure glad to have you on as part of our team for sure.
Thank you so much.
So look, let's dive in. This is going to be that show, man, where we do a recap show. And we mentioned this team quite a bit. And we spent quite a bit of time on this team throughout the season because the start of 2024 season, this coach was on the hot seat. And me and the chicken both love this guy. We were pulling for him all year long. And so we're gonna go back and talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks, also known as the Fighting Pittmans. So they had a decent season. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was, great, but it wasn't terrible. I think it kept Pittman's job for sure. I think they're doing some good things, but they had some up and downs. And I'll just kind of run through their games right now, and then me and the chicken will just kind of really get in and dissect it. So they started out with a 70-0 win over Arkansas Pine Bluff School for the vertically challenged people. And then the very next game, they took a loss to Oklahoma State in 2 overtimes, 39-31. Then they bounced back and beat UAB 37-27. Then they beat Auburn, which most people did, 24-14. Then they took a very close loss to a Texas A&M, and Texas A&M had pretty good season. And I mean, they were within 4 points, man. So that wasn't that far off. Then they took a win over Tennessee, and we got to remember, man, Tennessee beat quite a few people. Tennessee had a great season. Tennessee made the playoffs, and the Fighting Pittmans beat them 19-14. Then a loss to LSU, and then a W to Mississippi State, again, who didn't, and a loss to Ole Miss, a loss to Texas, a win against Louisiana Tech, a loss to Missouri. But
Boo.
yeah, we all know that Eli and his evil ways probably did something to make that score different. And then they went to a bowl game and beat Texas Tech. So all in all, not a bad season. A lot of promise in there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to love the energy that Pittman brings to this program in spite of everybody looking over his shoulder to begin the season. I mean, he's on one of the hottest seats in the conference going into the year because of the notoriety, the exposure that the SEC has, the way that this conference defines college football. You could argue that he was on the hottest seat in the nation. Not because of Arkansas, but because Arkansas is a school in the SEC. Stay with me, dog. What I'm trying to tell you is this guy did a phenomenal job. 6-6 regular season record is nothing necessarily impressive, but when you're doing it in the face of all that doubt, of all of the people who are buying boxes at Walmart, Walmart is home based in Arkansas. They're buying boxes for this guy to be able to move his stuff, and he pulls a 6-6 regular season record, caps it off with a bowl victory against the Red Raiders of Texas Tech. I think that's a mammoth job this past year.
Yeah, I mean, I do too, man. And let's look at it. I mean, he has some pretty good wins. We talked about Auburn's season. We talked, I said a minute ago who didn't beat Auburn, but Auburn had a lot of close losses. Auburn's season wasn't as bad as it looked on paper. On paper, Auburn's season looked terrible, but really and truly, it wasn't bad. Hugh Freeze, I think, is doing some good things in Auburn. There's no doubt, but they beat Auburn. I know they lost to Oklahoma State. Look, it's hard fighting those mullets. The fighting mullets, man. Sometimes you just never know what Gundy's going to do there. So I don't really necessarily give that a bad look. But then they beat Tennessee. They almost beat A&M. They lost. Their big loss, it was to LSU. That was a big loss. But, man, close one to Texas. I think their season was pretty good. Have you had a chance to look and see how many people they're losing to the portal?
Oh yes.
Oh,
and
shit.
it is not pretty.
Oh, no.
They lost 27 players to the
wow.
portal after this past year. Now, I'm going to tell you some of the names and either give me an oh no for that guy's really good or a who for nobody cares.
Okay.
Malachi Singleton.
Okay.
Rashad Dubian.
Okay.
Isaiah Satanga. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So, and since we don't know if I'm saying it right, there you go. Davion Dozier.
Whatever.
Right, him too. Luke Haas.
Yeah.
Right. Addison Nichols.
Don't know him.
Well, he's an O lineman. Rarely people know the O lineman. Tykeist Crawford.
I like his name.
He's another O lineman, and Josh Braun, another O lineman. Now, those are the ones who were notable, entered the portal. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if you felt the need after a 6-6 year to leave the Arkansas Razorbacks, who are clearly starting to build something, right now, and we know how the second year and even sometimes the third year comes in a rebuild process, right? Could be that step back. But if you're that guy, one of these 27 players that have left, that tells me that you don't think that you're competitive enough to take a spot on a rebuilding program. It doesn't tell me, especially from this list of names, that you're that bright spot. You're that all-star that maybe Alabama just missed on, and now they saw it based on what you did last year, so you'll go give them a chance. Nah, if you left the Razorbacks off of this list, dude, you're going to Pine Bluff.
Yeah. For the school, for the vertically challenged people.
Yeah, those guys too. I don't see it as a boon to your resume that you win in the portal. Now, he's got guys coming in, and we talk about this every week right now during the recap shows that we'll touch on that later.
Mm-hmm.
So don't sit there, Razorback fan, and think, you're 27 in the hole. You're not. He's building stuff. We've still got more time. There's another signing day coming up. Actually, we may have already passed it. Nobody cared. And you've got another portal opportunity coming your way before the season kicks off. So there's still opportunity for the Razorbacks to fill out this roster with some qualified players, some good players, some Pittman players, and have a good 2025.
Yeah, I mean, the portal opens back up or closes or whatever right after spring games, right? They have an opportunity after the spring game to bounce, correct?
Right, right. And they
I
take
thought
their
so.
ball and they go home.
Yeah. So Green's coming back. Their quarterback Green, he's coming back, right?
As far as I know, yeah.
See that? And he was pretty instrumental in some of their wins, man. So I do think that their running back is going into the NFL. I think that, and their main wide receiver Armstrong is headed to the NFL. But but every team is facing that, right? It's next man up. It's always next man up. And look, I think Sam Pittman can do it just as good as most coaches out there, man, and find that next man up and put him in place. That this year they brought in a new coordinator, offensive coordinator, and I'm drawing a blank because I'm old. And
You didn't even think to tell me that you were going to look for this, so I don't know who you're talking
isn't
about.
it Bobby Petrino?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
that's right.
Look at me. Yay.
Yes, sir, it is.
I remember. So look, man, so with all of those things that are happening in Arkansas, I see good things happening for Sam Pittman and the Fighting Pittmans for this upcoming season for sure. But like I said, some of these wins and some of these losses were very, very tight, man. Like I said, the Oklahoma State, man, 39-31. They're just getting their feet. Green threw for 416 yards, man. That's insane. So, his stats overall for the season, he had 3,100 yards in the air and another 600 yards on the ground. So, he had almost 4,000 combined yards and 15 touchdowns versus 9 interceptions, 8 rushing touchdowns. And he ran the ball more than Jaquan Jackson did. So I think they've got a bright future.
Yeah, and I think at the core of this team, as you look at the overhead view, 10,000 feet from this schedule that they played, a lot of times when you've got a team that goes 6-6, they maybe start off poorly and then they get it together halfway through the season. You start seeing those wins string together. Or the opposite, you see a team that maybe starts off hot, Texas A&M, and then starts to slow down at the back half of the year. If you look at from my roost this schedule, I see consistency. Now, you're going to sit there and scratch your head and say, well, where do you come up with that? I get there because the wins and the losses are kind of scattered around throughout this season, throughout this 12-game schedule. The losses, for the most part, are pretty respectable losses. As you mentioned, a double overtime loss to Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State.
That's right.
A close one to Texas A&M, and at the time, Texas A&M was on a burner. Okay, they lose to LSU. They got spanked. Okay, they got thumped by Lane Kiffin. They lose a close one to Texas. They lose a close one to the evil one in Missouri. This is not an embarrassment 6-6 record. This is a 6-6 record that shows a program that's fighting to not hang on in the SEC, but to climb in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. They went 3-5 in conference play. Not a good look.
Not a good look.
It's not. However, do I feel that they can pick one of those up? I mean, because we're looking, in a sense, we're looking at their season for next year as far as conference play. We know who they're playing in conference next year, right? So Auburn, that was a W. Can they keep a W there? But I would give them, I would look as a thumbs up for them for sure. A&M, they lost to A&M. I think that'll be a fight next year. I think they can potentially pick up one from A&M. They beat Tennessee. I think it'll be hard for them to beat Tennessee 2 years in a row. Nico's got some time under his belt. That game could actually flip.
That game will be in Knoxville this year.
I know. LSU, whew. And I know, like you said earlier, I know that we're going to go over this in another show later, but most people, including myself, and I'll even say the chicken, have very short-term memory. So I think we can kind of go over this now. Nobody's going to remember this, and we can have this show tomorrow and have a talk about the 2025 season. People still forget what we said, or at least I would. But LSU, they lost to LSU. Look, man, I'm going to keep them at an L on that for 2025. Nussmeier's back. I think LSU is going to be really, really stinking good next year. Mississippi State, yeah, I'll give them a W again for sure. Ole Miss, that's hard because Ole Miss has got hit pretty hard when it comes to people going into the draft. They lost a lot of folks, man. But it's Lane Kiffin. How do you really? It's hard to bet against Lane. Lane, if there's a coach out there, right, that has been so successful with the transfer portal and picking people up and making things happen, it's Lane Kiffin.
I thought you were going to say Ryan Day.
Well, that's, Ryan Day buys his team. Well, I guess Ryan Day himself doesn't buy the team, but the alums do. So Ole Miss, I mean, it's hard to say. Texas, I think Texas has got a huge question mark all the way around next year, in my opinion. And then Mizzou, there's no telling what that evil guy will do. So I don't know. I mean, I think their season. I think they could pick up a conference win next year. They could go 4-4 in conference, and I think that's a win.
I think what they will have to look forward to that they did not get this year is the surprise that should not be a surprise in Taylon Green at quarterback. And the reason I talk about that is this past year, you had Ernie out of Vanderbilt that took people by surprise all year long. Who's this wild and crazy guy that looks like a Muppet? And the Commodores are going 6-6, and they're going to a bowl game, and everything must be right with the world. And you didn't hear that much about Taylon Green. Lenoris Sellers, redshirt freshman, comes on the scene. He's having a great game, and then he's hurt, and then he's having a great game, and then he's not having such a, and then he's having a great game, and now he's a Heisman candidate going into next year. You don't hear about Taylon Green. Jalen Milroe, is he the second coming of Tim Tebow? No. But doggone, he sure looks good not doing it. And then you don't hear that much about Taylon Green. Next year, I think Taylon Green is going to be that guy that we act like we didn't see coming. But if you look at this kid's stats, he threw for over 3,000 yards last year. He's got 15 touchdowns last year, 9 picks, not a good look, but he takes charge of this offense. He ran the ball for 602 yards, your quarterback. So, again, that's why I mentioned Pavea first, Ernie Haybird, because I think that's the kind of player you've got here with Taylor Green, and I think that now nobody's impressed by Vanderbilt anymore. Yeah, we saw that movie. Now we want to see what Arkansas can do.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And so I'm going to echo what you just said, and I want all the listeners to know you've heard that first on Chicken and the Dog. I think Green is going to be a household name. I think we're going to talk a lot about him next season or this upcoming season. I do. I think that's a great point, and he's going to stamp his name not only in college football but in the Arkansas locker room. And it's going to be very exciting to see this team next year and what they can do. I'm a dog. Will always be a dog. I'm fat. I'm cute. Well, I don't know about the cute part. My tongue's hanging out. My tail's always wagging. So I'm a dog for life, man. But there's something special about this team and Sam Pittman that makes me want to just this guy to win every time.
There's something about the team. Yes, there's something. Sam Pittman just. I want barbecue every time I see Sam Pittman, and that's why I love the guy. I'm like, hey, look, anybody that reminds me of barbecue, I want to hang out with that dude. That's what Sam Pittman. But as a football coach, he harkens back to the old image that we all had of the great football coaches who weren't worried at the time about transfer portal or NIL or what criminal records. You guys in Athens can identify with that. But as far as like that
Easy.
Bear Bryant, Lou Holtz, Lovell Edwards, those guys, that old quintessential head football coach, to me, Sam Pittman embodies that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look, he was a dog at one point, man. So it's hard for me not to pull for old Sam Pittman, But you're right. I mean, he's still kind of that in that old school class. He's not the Lane Kiffins, the Kirby Smarts, the Dabo Sweeneys of the world. He's that old school guy, and he's still out there fighting like an old school guy, and I like that for sure. Um, Now I was going to say this, and look, we may be done with Arkansas. We may bring it back in the conversation, but um, you and I talked about this the other day, and I think it's worth mentioning. We can kind of definitely fill some more time talking about this, man. But the SEC, I guess the ADs have had a meeting this week, and they're talking about the playoffs, and they've got some questions, and I think one of the positive things that's going to come out of this is that the conference champions, what it looks like now is the conference champions game, that the conference championship games are still going to matter like they do now. If you win your conference, you're in. So if you're the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, you four guys are going to win. The conference champions are going to get in the playoffs, and then they're going to give one group of five a slot. So like a Boise State or whoever that might be, right? But what they're talking about doing, which I like, is giving them an automatic, but it doesn't put them in the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 slots. So still take them. You're in, but rank it as it should be. So you wouldn't have an Arizona State, or a Boise State. I guess Boise had the bye, right? So you wouldn't have a Boise State that would be ranked at number 10, jump to a number 3 spot because of Boise State and they won their conference and have a bye week. So I think those are positive things that they're coming. And I think they're going to more than likely expand to 14 starting 2026. But one of the things that is being stirred around that you and I talked about that I think is absolutely ridiculous. as an SEC guy, as an SEC show, I am 100% against this. Is the Big Ten and the SEC, because they own college football. They own college football. Is trying to make them have a guaranteed 4 spots each. And I think that is ridiculous. I think that's controlling things, and I don't like it.
I don't like it either. And I think that it's hypocritical to say, well, we want the conference championships to mean something, but we want the seeding to rank out the way that it should. In other words, just because you won your conference championship, Arizona State, doesn't mean that you should jump however many slots into a first round bye or whatever. Or Boise State, I think was the example you used since they got into that game. But I don't think you can say that with one breath and then turn around the next and say, oh, by the way, we want 4 guaranteed slots. So we want 8 of the 12 between the two conferences. Or if they go to 16, we want half of the field guaranteed to our two conferences. How can you say that the rankings should matter and then back that up with automatic bids 4 deep? I don't think you can.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, it's still, you want to have inclusion for your two conferences. That's what this boils down to. And to me, man, that's not college football. That's not what the fan wants to see. I did not like that the SEC didn't get a team into the national championship this year. That hurt. But man, it was a good game. You couldn't, we talked about this when we had the tournament, the playoffs in hindsight. Man, for everything that tournament, that playoff system lacked, for everything that could have been tweaked or fixed, it ended up playing out pretty cool.
It did. And also, at the end of the day, yeah, I'm with you. I didn't like that an SEC team was not in the national championship. I didn't like that either. However, you had three teams that had their shot at it. And guess what they didn't do? Win. We talk about that all the time, especially when we're talking about, should South Carolina make the playoffs? Should Alabama make the playoffs? Should an Ole Miss have made the playoffs? All of those teams had in somewhat of a legitimate argument of, they were good and could potentially be playoff worthy. But what we said at the end of it was, win your games. Just win your games.
Well, and now I think more than that, Big Ten, SEC. What are they doing? But they have the Big Ten SEC basketball challenge. Fine, go play each other in a non-conference regular season game. It'll go towards your record. It'll count towards your strength of schedule. Stop playing Pine Bluff. Stop playing South Carolina. Quit playing Wofford. I don't know who Georgia plays as their weakest maybe it's the Augusta Regent. I don't know who's over there. Whatever. Quit playing these little, tiny little schools that are just coming for that massive beat down paycheck. Instead, play somebody from the Big Ten. Play somebody from the Big 12. I mentioned the Pine Bluff game for Arkansas. Well, they also played Oklahoma State, right? So get games like that on your schedule. And instead of having these automatic bids, make your schedule so strong that when you finish a 9-3 year Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, that some of those 9 wins are not at the expense of a Wofford or a Sanford, right? Like, we beat Michigan, we beat Ohio State, we beat Indiana, whatever. I know I used them because they went 10-1 or 10-2. Have games like that on your schedule that strengthen who you are, strengthen your bid for those spots.
I agree. And now I'm not a. I say that the positive thing about a team like in Arkansas playing in Arkansas Pine Bluff is they do these Arkansas Pine Bluffs. They their athletic program depends on that money that they get paid as that warm up game, and so I understand that helps them out, but you they played. Let's just yes, you're right. They played an Oklahoma State, and at the time was ranked number 16 when they played them, and they lost to them. But they played Arkansas Pine Bluff. They played UAB. They played a Louisiana Tech. So they had 3 games that are lower tier programs that let's say they could have gave up one more of those. And look, I'm not picking on Arkansas because I want to pick on Arkansas. I'm picking on Arkansas because their schedule's sitting in front of me. Georgia does the same thing. Excuse me. Carolina does the same. Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss. That we all do the same thing. And so you're right. If you want your 9-3 season to look better, don't let 3 or 4 of those be from chump teams.
Yeah, and we all hear and you made the comment about a school like Pine Bluff coming and getting that big paycheck. When Steve Spurrier was at South Carolina, he wanted those non-conference games to go to other South Carolina schools. They would play South Carolina State. They would play and still do Coastal, Wofford. We've played Furman in the past. There's that one little school up in the upstate. Oh, Clemson. We play schools like that, right? Schools that are clearly beneath us, but we're trying to keep that payday in state. I don't think that mentality, that generosity necessarily lives on in the sport. And I don't mean that to besmirch the coaches and the ADs that are out there, right? Like the game has changed and it's about money now.
Oh, yeah.
It ain't about trying to help out your little brother down the road at Wish We Were Good Enough Tech. It's about building your program, your brand, your resume. And I don't think stroking $1.5 million to a small school for a homecoming beatdown is the way that you do that anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think, like I said, I don't think you do that with 3 or 4 of your non-conference games. I mean, you got 8 conference games. So you got 4 games that are going to be played that are non-conference. And, I think Georgia had one hard one. We played Clemson last year. But other than that, I mean, it was just chump teams and it was warm-up games. It was like pickup football. And yeah, Georgia made the playoffs, and we saw how far that went. But I mean, Alabama's team is no different. Ole Miss's team is no different. South Carolina's no different. If they would have, if one of those 9 wins, if Carolina would have scheduled a game against Ohio State and you'd have beat them, or a Michigan, like you said, or the Fighting Prophylactics, then maybe that's a different story. But when you play a Citadel or a Walford or something like that, or Furman, you just look, those games just look away. So, yeah, what they're trying to do is 4 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams, 2 ACC, 1 Big 12, and 1 Group of 5.
Which again, as we were saying the other day, that begins to expand the field for the conferences that want their opportunity expanded. But who do you automatically, with that grouping that you just listed out, who do you automatically start squeezing out?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Big 12, right?
I mean, who specifically? Notre
Uh,
Dame. God, you're slow. Notre
I
Dame. You start squeezing out Notre Dame. What did they do this year? Oh, wait, right. They went to the Natty. In that type of field, you have the opportunity because of the automatic bid game. You have the opportunity to squeeze out a Notre Dame.
actually no. I don't think that's the way to look at it. Notre Dame is always kind of in that hunt most years. I think what happens is Notre Dame every year is almost guaranteed that spot. So who does that leave out? The Central Floridas, a few years ago, the Boise States that had an incredible running back, Genty, that was keeping them in, those winning games left and right. It leaves out those type of teams that are very rarely ever get a shot into a 12-team playoff. Notre Dame probably has the greatest chance of gaining that last spot than any other team out there.
Well,
So it's almost their automatic bid.
But I'm not talking about a Notre Dame team that has an 11-1 regular season. I'm talking about the Notre Dame that has a 9-3 year, like the 3 SEC schools that were so hot and bothered that they didn't get in. And yeah, I'm talking about the Gamecocks. Those 3 schools couldn't understand how at 9-3, and you got to posture, you got to say all these things. These head coaches did, but those 3 schools just could not comprehend the audacity of the committee to leave them out. So you end up with this situation where they're out there crying about it. If you end up with a 9-3 Notre Dame in this expanded scenario where 4 bids here, 4 bids there, blah blah blah, does that 9-3 Notre Dame get left out? Especially if you end up with a wackadoo year like Central Florida had, a decade ago now, where they wanted to claim part of the national championship because they went undefeated.
Yeah,
but they were on the outside looking in. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
And I'm gonna tell you, Notre Dame's AD had already come out and said he was not for that at all, because it does put the squeeze on them a lot more than it does anyone else. And look, we all know at the end of the day, it's about money. And does the Big Ten and the SEC have a lot of it? Oh, for sure, they do. But so does Notre Dame.
So does Notre Dame. That's right.
They have some money, and they have some very powerful alum that gone to that school, and so I don't see that happening. I think that would be very detrimental to the sport, which we love, which is college football. I don't think it would be very. I just don't think it would be a wise move. By any, and this article that I was reading was talking about this. It said something like, yeah, could you imagine early November, that Iowa is getting in, that is, a number 20, a ranked 20 Iowa, but just because Ohio State and Penn State and I guess a Michigan is already in it, and they've got to put a fourth one. There's no other good teams. This year, in my opinion, was kind of a freak year for the Big Ten. They had 5 schools in it, right? They had Ohio State, they had Penn State, they had Indiana. Who am I missing?
I don't know.
Oregon, and I thought there was one more, and I could be wrong. So my brain's not thinking too well. Anyway, but they had quite a bit. So I don't see them having that every year.
No, which is what brings it back to the fact that it should be based on merit. Now, with that said, let me pose a chicken scratch moment.
Uh-oh, here we go.
One of the other things that's been talked about in the SEC meetings with these athletic directors is, are they going to go to a 9-game conference schedule? So my question, my chicken scratch moment is it better for the SEC, who is, in my opinion, not humble, not arrogant, just right? In my opinion, the strongest, most dominant conference in all of college football, nay, college athletics. Is it better for the SEC to pick up an additional game on their conference schedule and feed on themselves? Or is it better for the SEC to pick up another Power 5? Get rid of one of your tune-up games. Doesn't have to be Pine Bluff, whatever. But get rid of one of those games and pick up another Power 5 conference game. Pick up a game from the Big 12. Pick up a game from the Big 10. Pick up a game from the ACC. Which is better? Would you rather face Iowa, who's from the Big 10, or would you rather face Alabama in a year that you weren't thinking you were going to have to play Alabama?
I don't think I like the 9-game conference schedule. I don't. Because I think what if you know, and as we've been diving into these records, you know, going over these team seasons, what we're seeing constantly is a lot of inconsistency. They beat Tennessee. Arkansas beat Tennessee. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Oklahoma beat Alabama this year, for crying out loud. So you're seeing a lot of good teams, great teams within the conference beating the hell out of each other. And I mean, it's got to happen. There's no doubt about it. But I think if you add one more beatdown, I don't think I like that at all. But I do think I like the fact that you add, maybe you only have one chump game. Maybe your chump schedule is only one. Georgia had, now, I'm going to be careful with saying this because you're going to come back at me and you're going to have a legitimate argument about it. Georgia had 2 of their 4 non-conference games was against Power 5 schools. One of them we play every year. It's our in-state rivalry against Georgia Tech. This year, Georgia Tech was not a bad team. Matter of fact, this year, Georgia Tech took Georgia to 8 overtimes. We're 1 overtime away from setting a record, right? So, but in most years, Georgia Tech is a mediocre at best school, and Georgia should never lose to them. And the other team we play, Clemson. And you guys play Clemson every year. So should Georgia have picked up a Big Ten school? Should a Big Ten and an SEC and a Big Ten team each should play each other once a year? Maybe.
Here's I'm going to get into some Uncle Kenny math. You've seen that scene in The Hangover where Zach Galifianakis' character is getting ready to go in a casino. He's got all these equations flashing behind his head because he's apparently quietly brilliant. That's my Uncle Kenny. I'm going to give you some Uncle Kenny math here. If you have, and it doesn't have to be the Big Ten, it just needs to be not a Sun Belt, not a Conference USA. It needs to be a Power 5 conference, of which I think there's only 4. But whatever, that's different math. Once you put that on your schedule, you have automatically increased your strength of schedule. If you replaced an Arkansas Pine Bluff, or you know what, forget it. I'll go back to Carolina. I won't pick on anybody else. I'll talk about my school. If you take Wofford out of the mix, take them off of your schedule. Love you, Terriers. Good job. Mean it. Glad you're in Spartanburg. Now go away. And you put Iowa, or you put
North Carolina, or you put Oklahoma State. You put one of those schools on, your strength of schedule just went up. You want SEC ADs and Greg Sankey. You want automatic bids. Increase your strength of schedule with that, and then you beat that school. Here's where that complex Uncle Kenny math comes into play. Not only did you make your strength of schedule even stronger because you beat that school, you made them look bad. So when this committee is sitting there meeting and they're going, well, golly, we've got these SEC schools over here and these Big Ten schools. Well, some of those Big Ten schools lost these SECs. Now you get more attention naturally instead of being forced. And you earn those 4, maybe 5 spots. Let's get crazy. You know, a lot of people, I agree with that. And a lot of people, and I'll even go beyond the SEC and throw it back on the Big Ten. You know, a lot of people didn't believe that Indiana belonged in the playoffs. My hand is up in the air. I don't either. I didn't think they were that good. And it proved I was right in the first round of the playoffs. Imagine if Indiana would have played a Carolina or Georgia or an Alabama, or, for crying out loud, an Ole Miss. You know, somebody that's in a good SEC team, and they beat the SEC team. Then guess what? Indiana has a better leg to stand on to say, "Hey, I deserve to be here." Or if they lose, they're like, "Yeah, I know our record says we're, 10-2, but we're really not that good because we really didn't play anybody. The best team we played was Nebraska because they had that Texas Longhorn 2025 schedule. That weak schedule in their conference."
Well, and it provides equal opportunity to any and all teams that are going to be in that let's call it 1 through 20 positioning. As you're going through the year, you're getting late into the year and you're starting to look at who's in, who's out, who's on the bubble, whatever. When you've got that lens to look through. Now, Clemson does a good job of this. They play Georgia every once in a while, trying to bolster that strength of schedule. And even though they're a Power 5 conference, they're the ACC, right? So, and to that point, this conversation has them looking at hoping for 2 automatic bids for the ACC. If you take that crap off the table and you end up with a Clemson and a North Carolina and a Miami, and maybe Florida State remembers that they're not playing pickleball, they're playing football, then you end up with more competition coming out of these conferences that can say, hey, we beat South Carolina. We beat Ohio State. And it bolsters their resumes. It just gets everybody back to that even playing field. The whole thing about going into this computer playoffs and then now we're doing committee playoffs and blah, blah, blah is because we didn't like the old way where people were voting on it. Well, that's biased. How is this any different with guaranteed spots in a playoff than your favorite writer, my favorite writer, and the votes that they get? It's not. You're stacking the deck.
Yeah, you're stacking the deck. You're telling the system how it's going to work, and I don't like it at all. Should there be 4 SEC teams in the playoffs on a 12-team playoff? in most years? Yeah, I would say that that's probably a pretty fair statement. Should there be 3 to 4 teams in the Big Ten that should make the playoffs? Okay, I can buy that. But you got to let the Cards play the way that they play, man. I mean, nobody saw an Arizona State playing, coming out the way that they did. And Arizona State played great football. If Scadaboo would not have been sick that day, they would have beat Texas. They would have made it to the next round. And you can't leave a team like an Arizona State, like a Colorado, like a Boise and these other schools. You can't leave them out. I mean, what if, like you said, what if Belichick does a good job in North Carolina? We know with Dabo dabbing into the portal now, we know that I believe that Clemson is back on the rise. I believe that. And so Miami's going to be good. They got Carson Beck under center. I think that's going to help them. I think that's a good thing for them. Are you really going to limit? What if a North Carolina and a Clemson and a Miami all deserve to be in a 12-team playoff? Then let them be in, for crying out loud. I don't like it at all.
And we digress.
I was about to go. I digress. So, look, man, there's a lot of things that's happening out there, and I think this is going to be, always evolving. It's never going to be right. I think the closest way you get to right is move it to a 16 team. You and I talked about that. You and I love that idea. And then you play, and the best team wins. And at the end of the day, like you said earlier, man, the best team won this year. As much as it pains me to say, not only to say that it wasn't an SEC team, but that it was Ohio State.
Who had an SEC roster.
Yeah, that had an SEC. Thank you, Uncle Kenny. But it pains me to say that, but they were the better team. They deserved to win the national championship. I still don't like the coach. I still don't think he's good, but that's different story for a different day. Or maybe I beat that horse to death. So,
either way, he makes more money than we do.
As of right now, hang on. Hang on, fellas. Joe Rogan, here we come. Maybe not. So, look, man, I don't have anything else unless you do.
I'm all crowed out.
All right, look, man, follow us on all those platforms that Bryson says. Bryson, you got anything you want to say before we're out?
Yeah, sure. I'll let's see. Only on YouTube will we have the links available, but in the description there, you can find all the socials in there and whatnot. And you follow us at Chicken and the Dog.
Nice. All right, guys, email us, follow us, like us, send us money, help Bryson go to college.
Go Dogs.
Go Dog. Love you guys. Deuces.
Bye.